Good morning and welcome to Scotland Speaks. Can I take this opportunity first of all to thank all of you who have written in and said, every single one of you, that you're so delighted that we're continuing with the show. In fact, you've all said that is precisely what Alex would want for me to do, and that is why I'm standing before you today to continue in his great work and his legacy. And I'd just like to play out for you just a selection of some of the messages you've been so kind to send us in over the last week. Thank you so much indeed for these kind comments, and please do keep them coming in. Now, you remember last week I asked if you'd be so kind to think about some of your personal stories or experiences you might have had with Alex, and to write them down and email it into the show, and then hopefully come in and read them out yourself to the audience. I've already received some amazing, wonderful, heartwarming stories, and hopefully after the Christmas and New Year break on the new set, we'll take a time out in every single episode of the show to reflect on some of your more personal stories. In the meantime, please do keep your comments coming into the show. It's so lovely to hear from you at this difficult time in the lead up to Christmas and New Year, when we have so many memories of that time with Alex. Now, last week I had said we were going to be speaking to Mike Daly about the Fannings winter fuel payment case. Unfortunately, or fortunately for Mike, he's tied up in court this week, so instead you'll be watching him next Saturday morning. The benefit of that will be, of course, that he'll be appearing on the show with Josh Robertson. Now, Josh Robertson stood for the ALBA Party in the general election of earlier this year, a very favourite candidate of Alex, but he's organising public meetings with the Fannings, one which is taking place next Monday, some details which you'll see on your screen here. So please do attend that meeting, and he'll be back in the studio next week to tell us all about how that meeting went. And of course, we'll hear from Mike too with some updates on the winter fuel payment case. Now back to this week's show. I'm delighted to be interviewing in our studio today the Deputy General Secretary of the ALBA Party, Corri Wilson, who also stood for the party as a general election candidate earlier on in this year in July. And she'll reflect on some of her stories of Alex on the campaign trail, which of course involved ice cream and fish and chips. Of course it did. I'll also be speaking to Alan Ross. Now, Alan Ross from Dundee not only stood in the general election, but he was also a local by-election candidate for us in the Lochie ward earlier this year. And it was Alan Ross's campaign, the local by-election campaign in Lochie, which was the last campaign that Alex was able to be involved in. And what a campaign that was. And Alan's got some great stories and many pictures to show you about that. But before we head into the studio and just after the break, here's a reminder of some of the lovely memories we heard from Neil Hanvey and Chris McElhenney in last week's show, which was Remembering Alex Salmond. That show, of course, was dedicated to Alex. Every show is dedicated to Alex, and we hope to talk about him every single week.
And then when we started going places, so it was quite amazing. Went to EFTA, spoke to the Secretary General of EFTA, sitting in the room with Alec, or go to Catalonia, watch the world press, wanting to hear his opinion. It really did drive it home to me that the world looked at Alex Salmond as the voice of Scotland. Regardless if he'd been out of office for several years or not, he was the face of the Scottish independence movement. It was Alex Salmond that the Catalonians would look to for advice and leadership, particularly because they had quite a difficult period, and they saw Alex as someone that actually delivered, a referendum beyond legal challenge, which was very much their dream. So when you were in Catalonia, it was almost like being in a rock band. Seeing how people would stop Alec in the street, and you would actually be surprised. He would always, joke that he wasn't surprised, but I think he was surprised sometimes as well. That you'd be walking along the street. A story told me one of the trips I wasn't on when he was in California, and a bus stopped of, I think it was it Vietnamese tourists, because they recognised Alex Salmond, and they stopped and they wanted selfies with him. And I don't think people in Scotland actually appreciated or even realised that they had this, internationally recognised, respected, and credible leader that actually, in 2014, would have taken us onto the international stage, would have had the international community willing to talk to him how we could develop as a country. And actually, 10 years on from the referendum, he was still the person to go to.
Well, I think the quality that Alec, I think you've hinted at it already, Taz, the quality that Alec had that set him apart from many other politicians was that he was genuinely interested in the people that he represented and genuinely interested in making the lives of the people of Scotland better. That's his mission. It wasn't independence for its sake, it was independence as a gateway to a better future for the people of Scotland. And so we must always ensure that we continue to frame our efforts in that way. I mean, the campaign that he was working with Fannings and Mike Daly on challenging the winter fuel payment cut is just a perfect example of how passionate he was about these challenges and the challenges that people faced. And so we have to honour that ambition for the people of Scotland. We have to make sure and always ensure that our policies are about making the lives of the people of Scotland better, because only by pursuing those types of policies do you continue to build on the trust and confidence of the people of Scotland. And that's how you give people the courage to step forward towards independence. And so that's absolutely fundamental. I mean, Alec did it in spades as First Minister, but he never gave up on that grounding support for the people.
With that, we move indoors and to this week's show. Again, holding firmly in our hearts how we miss the fact that Alex isn't with us, but we'll work hard to continue with his legacy. See you after the break.
Water is life, but not all water is equal. Our water ionizer restructures and alkalizes water for optimum hydration and detoxification, recreating the planet's ultimate water sources, found in lightning-struck lakes and newly melted icebergs. H2 Pure Source. Change your water. Change your life.
Welcome back to Scotland Speaks In, from the Glasgow cold outside to the warm studio, and two lovely warm people who've got some great warm memories of Alex Salmond, Alan Ross and Corri Wilson. Welcome to Scotland Speaks, and to the studio, both for the first time, I think. Corri, I'm going to come to you first. I'd mentioned in the opening remarks, because we're going to talk about your experiences with Alex and Alex's legacy, and then we're going to move on to talk about what now for independence, what now for ALBA. But I recall, because I was with him in Ayr when he was campaigning with you in the general election, that he created quite a stir.
He did. And it was we were in such a good position where we were in terms of traffic and people going past. But as is always the case when you're with Alec, everybody wanted to speak to him, everybody wanted to come up and say something to him. But I think what was really interesting was there was flats across the road from us, and there was a couple come out that flat who actually had no intention of voting or they weren't supporters, but when they saw Alec, they wanted to come out and speak to him. And of course, Alec being Alec, he totally convinced them what was the best way forward, and they went away saying that they would be voting. Typical Alec. I was just going to say that is so typical Alex. And as I'd mentioned, we were in a great roundabout. We've got some photographs that will appear on the screen. But we were at a sort of roundabout, or a junction area, which was ideal, lots of passing trade. And two established businesses, ice cream shop, you can give them a plug, and also a fish and chip shop. And I just remember the staff coming out. I think it was the ice cream first, followed by the fish and chips. Tell us a bit about that. Reynolds is the ice cream shop, and it's been a family-run business for a while. And it was the two staff members come out to give Alec an ice cream. And I don't know if the chip shop saw that next door and thought, well, we'll go next. But they appeared with a whole fish and chips for him as well. And that's the Wellington Cafe there. So yeah. And
of course, you were there with your whole campaign team. So Alex says, in you go, Taz, buy ice creams for everybody else, because there was no way he was going to sit and eat it himself. You know, obviously, warm heart, generous spirit always. Absolutely. So I went back in and I remember trying to remember everyone's flavours, but we managed. Alan, Alex campaigned with you, first of all, in the general election in the campaign, and we'll move to the by-election in a second, but in the general election campaign, give us your reflections of what happened, because after the manifesto launch, Alex was headed into the High Street area in Dundee.
Into Dundee City Centre, yeah. So we took him past his favourite statue, the Desperate Dan statue that you spoke so fondly of.
Did he tell you the story again?
Yes, I don't know how many times I heard the Desperate Dan story, but it was always nice when he spoke about it. Yeah, we took him to a local business, the Dundee Barber Shop, which is where I go. But just trying to walk from the Caird Hall up to the barber shop, you know, it took, well, you were there, it took quite a while, didn't it? And so many people stopping him in the street and wanting to speak to him. And I think we actually, at one point, ended up sitting down on the benches in the street just so that everybody could come up and have a chat with him.
Well, we wanted to speak to some passers-by, and you know, you always got delayed, of course, getting to the final destination. Then when we got into the barber shop, it looked like several people wanted to cut his hair, and then there were people coming in from shops nearby to bring him tea, coffee, whatever it was he wanted. It was a lovely time. But then, of course, Alan, in the local by-election where ALBA did really well in Dundee, you were the candidate recently in Lochee. That was, of course, the last campaign that Alex was here with us to fight. Tell us a bit about that, because he was determined to make at least 2 campaign trips.
Which he did. So I'll speak a bit about the first one, which I'll never forget. So running up, it was a Friday that he was coming, and I think he was travelling to Edinburgh from Stricken with Moira. And you know, there was a bit of arranging going on in the days running up, and he'd said, I'm passing through Dundee on Friday, find a local business in your ward and we'll do something. Okay. And it just so happened I was picking up a leaflet from the printer that day, which is in the ward, and we went there. I think I had about 2 or 3 phone calls with Alec in the run-up to the Friday about various things. And all the time he was saying, now remember Alan, we've got 20 minutes. We're just passing through Dundee on our way to Edinburgh. I've got Moira with me, 20 minutes into the printer, we'll do what we need to do, get the photograph, and then I'm on the road. No problem. And the next call, is everything right? Everything's arranged, Alex. 20 minutes, no problem. So we arrived, we turned up, everything was great. And, 20 minutes became 2.5 hours of sitting. And it's sort of a setup, not too dissimilar to this. They set up a room with teas and coffees, and just a real fantastic afternoon of listening to Alec talking about his career and stories that he had, and listening obviously to the stories the printers had. It turned out that the guy that owned the printer had met Alec a while previously on holiday in Cyprus, and they were talking about it. And then that was intermingled with stories about interviewing Sharon Stone and Graham Souness, and you know, you just couldn't make it up. You know, it was just a great afternoon.
I love the afternoon. And if I recall, Alex and Moira were on their way down towards Edinburgh, because the following morning early was the celebration of 25 years of the Scottish Parliament. I think that's what he was doing on the way down the road, but obviously got very delayed, but thankfully that was the evening before. But I do remember asking you, Alan, if you had any photographs, because I said, I know Alex has been campaigning, but where are the campaign pics? What happened?
Well, so obviously that's the whole point of doing any event like that, is to get photographs for the campaign, and it was a local business, and you know, we were showing we were supporting a local business as well. And so throughout that whole 2.5 hours, it wasn't until Alec was back in the car, my dad was with me that day, and we got back in my car, and my dad said, what's up with you? And I said, I never got a photo.
But that was okay, because he made up for it the next time he came down, which was just, I think, probably a week or so later. What happened during that campaign visit?
Yeah, so that was a few days later. That was the Tuesday, and the election was on the Thursday, obviously. And that was a brilliant day as well. We started off at the ALBA Cllr, which is a food bank stroke cafe, which does a lot of great work in the local area. And he spent, as he did, you know, a good amount of time with the people there, chatting to them, really interested in what the project was doing. And then we went out into Lochie High Street, and we were in Posh Nosh Cafe, and a similar story to Corri's about the people who wouldn't necessarily go and vote, but this young lad was, oh, you're that, I've seen you on the TV, and it was just, you know, he would speak to anybody in the same way, in the same level, you know, and then we went inside the cafe, and there was a lady in there that obviously, you know, recognised him, and he sat down and had a cup of tea with her, and I don't think the people who owned the cafe could really quite believe what was happening, you know, because it was just a spur of the moment thing. And then after that we went chapping doors. And the one thing I'll always remember about that day, and will remember forever, was just before he got back in the car, he was going to Glasgow Airport, and just it kind of came from nowhere, just this enormous bear hug, and I think he said something like, well done son, or something like that. And you know, I'd spoke to him after that on the phone, but that was the last time I actually saw him in person. And you know, little did I know how much that hug was going to mean. Thank you, Alan,
for sharing that with us. A lovely moment that you will always remember, as so many people remember the last conversation, the last text message, the last interaction with Alex. But you spoke about what Alex was like on the street with ordinary folk he really liked to campaign with and hear their stories. Corri, I'm going to take you back into the House of Commons, because of course you were an MP in 2015 to 2017 when Alex made his comeback. We all remember that picture of him waltzing through with the white rose, the epic image of him being back in the UK Parliament, and an image that we were looking forward to seeing being repeated in the Scottish Parliament in 2026. But how was Alex in that House of Commons environment? Your reflections of how he dealt with us as a group of new MPs, and of course the other politicians around him, the Speaker, etc. What was your experience of that?
Going even back before that, the first time I really met Alec was in 2012 when he came down to Ayr see the group of council candidates that were going to be standing in the election. And the SNP administration at the time had built some new houses, so he came down to meet us all there. And the funny thing was that after that he was going on to the races, so he gave us a tip, and needless to say it won. So everybody was delighted. But again, he was there to speak to us and give us a bit of encouragement, etc. But there he was away down the street talking to people walking dogs, and folk were stopping the car, and he was in the car windows chatting, and that's just exactly what he was like. And in 2015 he came down to Cumnock for a big event for my campaign. Now there must have been over 150 people in Cumnock Town Hall, and the atmosphere was electric. Now, bear in mind, there's a Keir Hardie statue outside Cumnock Town Hall, and he must be turning in his grave when he sees what's going on now. But that event was just absolutely incredible. And then, as you say, we got elected and we went down there. And, for many of us, the reality is we were a bit green behind the ears going down there. So we looked to Alec to have that sort of mentoring and give us some advice about how we take things forward. And again, he's just his confidence in, he knew the system, he knew what to do, he knew what to ask, but it was quite obvious though, there was a huge amount of respect from him from across the political parties. But Alec being Alec in the chamber, he never missed and hit the wall, that was for sure.
We always look forward to his speeches, but I remember him telling us on arrival, make sure you take time to speak to the staff of the House of Commons. Greet the staff of the House of Commons, remember their names, they're really important people, the most important people there. And you recall, Corri, I think it was the first Christmas in 2015, we'd clubbed together to give gifts and make sure that we respected the people who were doing the real hard work in the House of Commons, the doorkeepers, etc. Such a nice group of people. But of course in the chamber, it was always interesting when he stood up because he had interesting things to say. And we went down there, and I suppose it brings us back to the politics of the moment, which is very important. That, in 2015 we went down there to ensure that the Tories and Labour, the Better Together campaign, and the Liberals, what was left of them, delivered on the vow, which is what they promised us, and that's why we went down in such great numbers. Do you think now, reflecting back, that the famous 56 could have been bolder, as some of us, and I include you in the same group as me in that, wanted to be, and making sure that it didn't look to people who'd voted for us that we were settling down as opposed to settling up? No, definitely. And I think at the end of the day, from my point of view, it was important to listen to what Alec had to say in terms of how we could use our position down there to follow the cause. Because as you said, 56 MPs, Scottish nationalist MPs being elected was just unheard of, really. And we could have used that position and that time to forward the cause more than I think that we did. And that certainly wasn't down to Alec, that was for sure. Because there was a lot of times in our group meetings he wanted to try X, Y and Z, or he put a suggestion forward that unfortunately wasn't taken. But I do think, if Alec had had more of an input, then we would have definitely been further down the line than we are now. Of course, he always taught us to understand the rules of the House of Commons and understand what Erskine May said, and he was always armed with that. And he also introduced us to the Hansard writers, because a lot of us were introducing language into the House of Commons that they might not have heard of before. But also he says, if you miss out bits in your speech that you didn't get the time to say, you can add it to the Hansard, and they'll be helpful in making sure that it's an accurate reflection of what you said, which was very helpful to us also. But moving forward, which we have to, and that is politics without Alex. Alan, I know he felt very strongly about the work you were doing in Dundee around the issue of drugs and rehabilitation. And how important do you think it is having that real life experience in these areas if you want to be a parliamentarian and really make people's lives better with that knowledge?
Well, I think it's absolutely crucial, Taz, isn't it? Because, you know, if you're going to be in a position where you're legislating and deciding policy for the country and for the people of that country, then you need to have a bit of an understanding of the real issues that these people are facing. And, you know, Scotland has some of the worst drug death fatalities in Europe, and Dundee chief among that as well. And, you know, Shona Robinson's announcement last week of the budget is, funding for residential rehab frozen, which in real terms represents a cut where, you know, funding in other areas has increased, which wouldn't necessarily be my first place to be funding. And so that's the backdrop that we're against. There's a target to have 1,000 rehab beds in Scotland, but which is a great aim to have, but, you know, there's far more than 1,000 people needing it.
And independence. This is going to be a very important election in 2026. We're either going to have a nationalist majority or we're going to have a unionist majority, and very much the fate of independence, or the speed upon which it can be delivered, will depend on the result of that election. What do you think the politicians or the aspiring candidates need to be doing to engage the public? Because I'm sure you will have found, Alan, even in your own campaigning, a lot of the public are not interested. They've had enough of politicians. What do we need to do to draw people to the cause?
We need to talk to them. We need to be out there being active in our local communities. So myself and Ghazi Khan, who stood in the Arbroath and Brockley Ferry seat in the general election yesterday, we were out visiting the Cllr Park Golf Club yesterday, which is separate to the Cllr Park Golf Course, but the golf course is losing its funding from the council, and as it stands is going to close. And it's engaging with, you know, sort of grassroots campaigns like that and saying we've had enough of this, because and it's a valid criticism that I've already faced by a couple of people in this campaign for the golf course, and that I was an administration councillor with the SNP in the past and, you know, was involved in some of those things. But I got to a point where I just didn't know, you know, what is the end game here, because I don't think anyone joined the SNP certainly we did to get into government and to run in councils and things, but not to be passing on the cuts that are coming from Westminster. And that's difficult to do, but, you know, there needs to be a bolder strategy there, not just saying, well, it's Westminster's fault, it's Westminster's fault. Of course, a great deal of it lies with Westminster, but what are we doing to change that? And independence, of course, is the answer to that. And so we need to be getting back out into our local communities and talking to people about independence, about how crucial it is. We've seen things like the winter fuel payment being cut. There's all sorts of things coming down the road. You know, the scandal of the energy situation in Scotland. We need to be able to educate people on that and the importance of delivering a pro-independence majority in 2026, but not just a pro-independence majority, one that will actually get on and do the job of delivering independence.
Corri, on the point of independence, you are Deputy General Secretary of Alex's party, the ALBA Party, formed to advance the cause of Scottish independence and to deliver upon it. Tell me a bit more about what the party is going to be doing to make sure the legacy of Alex lives on, and the work we're doing to make sure that the dream of independence is realised.
I think, you know, the last few weeks have been very difficult for all of us, but what has been encouraging is the number of contact and emails from members and the wider public just sharing their memories of Alec, and it makes you realise just what an impact that he had, which makes that legacy even more important. And, you know, you said about us, you know, getting elected in 2015. We went down there to deliver independence. That was the whole point. And then, of course, we got there and English votes for English laws happened, and the whole thing just seemed ridiculous at that point. But from us now, I think we are in a position that we can deliver Alex's legacy. We have people coming forward who absolutely want to make sure that legacy is delivered. And also, members desperate to get involved and seeing how they can help. And one of the ways that we are going to be doing that over the next few weeks is some national assemblies. And the national assemblies will be on equalities, but also, as Alan mentioned, energy. We're going to have the Fannings on to tell us about their court case and give us an update on that. That particular topic is really important to many people right now because, well, the last week or so the weather's been horrendous. People are finding it difficult to heat their homes. And as been said often, in an energy-rich country, it's just outrageous that people have to make these choices. So very much in terms of the party, and of course, unfortunately, we couldn't go ahead with our conference, but that has been postponed until March. And again, that's going to give us an opportunity to take Alex's legacy forward and really look at how we can now deliver that legacy.
Of course, taking Alex's legacy forward is key to all of us. It's key to the future of Scotland because, as I've heard mentioned a few times now, the only reform Scotland needs is independence. And the scandal of fuel poverty amid energy plenty is one that plagues us here in Scotland. And we're going to be hearing from Mike Daly and Josh Robertson next week, who of course is arranging public meetings, Josh, around the country so people can be aware about the Fannings case. In terms of honouring Alex's legacy, one of the things we can do is work hard and not stop working. One of the reasons for keeping the show going and keeping everything going is because Alex would always say, just keep going. And Corri, I'm sure I'm right when I say, like myself, I don't believe there is a single National Executive meeting, conference, National Assembly or National Council meeting that Alex has ever missed. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
He's been every single one, so we have to take our lessons that we have to work hard to achieve, and the work doesn't stop. I'd like to thank you both very much indeed for coming into the studio and sharing some of your thoughts and memories of Alex and what we need to do to continue. I know it's difficult for both of you, it's difficult for all of us. In fact, most of the time it seems almost impossible until you remember that, get the words in your ear, keep going, which is what we'll do. So in that vein, Alex had approved and had me order some special keyrings that say Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond, so I'm going to pass you one each. Now, along with the keyrings, Alex also had me ordering some Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond hats. So anyone who writes in with their stories or memories of Alex, either for me or someone else to read out, one of our guests maybe, or even to come into the studio themselves to read out, please do so, and I'll be delighted to pass him over to you. Alex had a very special segment in previous shows, of course, called Scotland's Hidden Heroes. It was his favourite part. He used to research it and tell us all about things we probably should have known or should have been taught in school but learnt from him. We discussed that we were going to move on from Scotland's Hidden Heroes to some of the current ones. That's you, the people working in your communities every day to make them better, people working for the cause of independence to make Scotland better and a fairer place, a more prosperous place for everyone. So I'd like for you to write in to me with your current modern day heroes, and let's hear some of their stories. And if they're willing, or if indeed you are your own hero, I'd be delighted to have you into the studio to tell me your stories. But with that, I remind you that next week we'll be hearing from Mike Daly and Josh Robertson about the Fannings winter fuel payment case, an idea that came from Alex Salmond. He was the very best strategist and the best of all of us. See you next week.